Hi, I'm Rick Martínez, a food editor and recipe developer. My Mexican heritage inspires everything that I do, the food that I cook, what I write, and today I'm gonna share with you one of my favorite sauces. It's a mother sauce in Mexico, mole. So this is a very specific type of mole. It's called Coloradito. That means red mole. And so all moles, and there are so many different types in Mexico, are chili-forward sauces. There's usually a sweet component and there's usually a nutty component. There's always a warming spice component to it. So I've broken this dish up into 3 parts to make it really easy for the home cook. Part 1, the heat component, which are the chilies. Part 2, the sweet component, which are the dried fruits and nuts. And Part 3, the vegetable component. Let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is work on Part 1, the heat component, which are the chilies. So for this recipe, because it's really a red mole sauce, I'm using red chilies. One of my favorites are the chili ancho, and you can even see like how beautiful and burgundy colored that is. A really good dried pepper will be flexible, it's going to be soft, it's gonna be really fragrant. If it's dry and brittle, then it's probably been sitting on the store shelf for a really long time. It probably doesn't have a lot of flavor. It should be almost like dried fruit. So think of a raisin with a lot of sweetness and still some residual moisture on the inside. The next pepper we're gonna use is the guajillo. It's not as sweet as the ancho. It has a little bit of a sharper bite, whereas the ancho is sweet and mild generally. This one has a little bit sharper flavor, almost like the flavor of paprika. And then our heat is going to come from these. It's called the cascabel. If you can hear that, that is the rattling of the seeds inside, and this does actually have a bite to it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to seed these peppers. I always wear gloves whenever I seed peppers, not necessarily for the heat, although the cascabel are pretty spicy, but mainly because when you open these guys up, if they're still moist in the center, which they should be, they're going to, stain your hands, and they're a little bit sticky, and that's exactly the way they should be. And you want to make sure that you get as many of these seeds out as possible. Sometimes they stick to the sides, especially if they're pretty moist and fresh. Just pull them out. There's not a lot of heat here. What we're really trying to do is just get rid of them because they're a little bit more woody. They're a little thicker than, say, the seeds in a jalapeno or serrano. All right, that looks good. We can just lay them out on a sheet tray. 5 minutes in a 350-degree oven is usually about the exact amount of time you want to toast chilies. So these chilies are really common across the United States. So if you can't find the cascabel at your local grocery store or Mexican market, you can definitely find them online. And if you don't get all the seeds, it's fine. As long as your blender is powerful enough to pulverize the seeds, you'll be good. All right. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to add the spice component to this as well. And so I'm just gonna sprinkle over some Mexican oregano and then a little bit of cumin. And then I really like the combination of cumin and coriander. So these are coriander seeds. And by toasting all of these spices, we're really going to bring out their flavor. They're gonna get a richness that they just won't have out of the jar. They'll start to take on a slightly nutty, toasty flavor. I'm using a little bit of peppercorn. That will give a nice little warm hit. And then this is canela. So this is essentially Mexican cinnamon, or Ceylon cinnamon is how it's labeled in the US. So I'm not gonna use a full stick of it. So I'm just gonna break a piece off. And if it splinters, that's totally fine. And if you can't find it, use an inch piece of cassia cinnamon. These are avocado leaves. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, where am I gonna get these? They do exist in specialty grocery stores, but they have a really amazing flavor. Think of this as a bay leaf type ingredient. They've got like an almost anisey fennel flavor to them. And then once they're toasted, they start to take on notes of hazelnuts, which is really amazing. And then finally, we've got 1 bay leaf and 1 clove because it's very intense and we don't want it to taste like Christmas. So I'm gonna throw these into an oven, 350 degrees. It's gonna take about 5 to 7 minutes. So next, I'm going to work on the sweet ingredients. These are also going to get toasted. I have some pepitas, or raw pumpkin seeds. I've got some raw, untoasted sesame seeds. I'm using slivered almonds, also raw and untoasted. I'm using salted roasted peanuts because I want a really intense roasted flavor. And also the salt's just gonna help us with the seasoning in the end. And these are raw pecans. All right. And we're gonna put some raisins in here. These are gonna add a really nice sweetness. They're also gonna add an acidity, which is going to be a really nice counterpoint to a lot of the toasted nut flavors. And then dried prunes. Also very common in Mexican cooking, and a lot of people don't realize that. And so now we're just gonna wait for the chilies to toast, and then we'll swap trays. Yeah. All right. And there's a little bit of smoke coming off, and don't be alarmed, because that's exactly what it should look like. You can see they still have their nice color. The red color's gone into a brick red. But yeah, these look really good. They smell really great. I'm gonna throw these in the oven now. While the sweet things are roasting, I'm going to put these into a bowl. Basically, both this tray and the tray that's in the oven are going to get added to our mole sauce at the same time. And if it's too hot for you to handle, just wait a few more minutes. These chilies will actually cool down pretty quickly. All right, it's been about 12 minutes. I'm going to pull the fruits and nuts. Oh, they smell really good. All right. You can see everything's taken on a little bit of a brown color. The raisins have kind of plumped up a little bit and changed color as well. This is gonna add a lot of flavor to the mole. So now that they've cooled down a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer to the bowl. Now we're up to part 3, the vegetables. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to preheat my pan, and we want the really fully developed, almost over-ripened plantain. So you wanna cut your plantain into 1/2-inch rounds. What I like to do is just run my knife down the side and split the skin open, and then it's just really easy to peel. And you can see how soft it is. And that's really what we want in here. And so these are actually pretty common in Mexico. They aren't native to Mexico. They were actually brought by Africans that came into Mexico after the Spanish arrived. So for this recipe, I'm using schmaltz. You can use really whatever fat you want. I love schmaltz because it has a really intense chicken flavor. It's gonna add a lot of depth and umami. And then you just wanna add these carefully to the pot. We want to caramelize both sides. Like I said, there's quite a bit of sugar in there, not as much as a ripe banana, but there is a decent amount of sugar. All of that sugar, when caramelized, is going to add flavor. It's going to intensify the flavors of the plantain itself. So this dish is all about balance, and so that's why these measurements may seem a little odd to you, but it's definitely about finding the exact right amount of sweetness and sharpness and heat and acidity to make this a really well-balanced dish. All right, we're getting some good color on there. If they start to stick, just kind of scrape the bottom and move them around. Make sure they're nicely coated with the oil. That'll prevent them from sticking. While these plantains are cooking, I'm going to prep my onion. I'm gonna start by taking the top and bottom off. For this dish, I'm only using half of the onion. I will save the rest for another dish. Peel the skin off. So the way that I like to cut my onion is put your palm on the top, that'll stabilize, and then just give the knife a gentle push towards the back. Don't cut all the way through. You want a really nice sharp knife for this. And then turn the onion, make your claw, and then just make the cross cuts. All right. And then you have a nice even dice. And all right, here we go. And it looks like my plantains are done. So I'm going to transfer them to a bowl. I really wanted to get a lot of this caramelization both on the plantains and at the bottom of the pot. That's gonna add flavor. And once I put the onions in, I will pick up a lot of that caramel. All right. So I've got 5 garlic cloves. I'm gonna give them a rough chop. These are all gonna get blended anyway, so I just wanna get color on more of the sides by doing this. All right, that's good. All right, add those in. And now I'm going to season my veg. I am a big proponent of seasoning the veg and putting all of the seasoning in at once. That's gonna do a couple of things. It's going to season the dish in total, but also, and more importantly, you're gonna draw out the moisture in the veg. And what that's going to do is it's going to help the veg cook, but it's also going to draw out some of the sugars. And again, it's the sugar and the caramelization that's gonna give this dish so much flavor. So I'm adding 4 teaspoons of kosher salt. I'm gonna give that a little stir. And if the heat seems like it's too aggressive, then definitely turn it down. Everybody's stove is a little bit different. Gas stoves are different than electric stoves. And then as the moisture comes out of the onion, go ahead and give the bottom of the pan a little scrape and get up all these little brown bits. That's flavor. So these are looking really good. I'm gonna go ahead and add my tomatoes now. Just gonna make a little well in the center. So I'm using fire roasted tomatoes. If you don't have them, you can use diced tomatoes. We're gonna cook them for about 5 to 7 minutes, just until all of the liquid evaporates, and we'll get rid of that tinny flavor if there's any of that from the can. Again, if you see any little brown bits in the pan, go ahead and scrape them up. All right, it's been about 7 minutes. This is looking really good. We're almost there. So now, at this point, all of the 3 parts of this dish are gonna come together in this pot. We're gonna cook everything together. We'll start by adding back our plantains. Now we're going to put parts 1 and 2, the chilies and the seeds, nuts, and dried fruit, back in the pot. And if they are coming out, just give them a little crush. The chilies are pretty brittle at this point, and that's exactly what you want. And then I have chicken stock. If you're going the vegetarian option, vegetable stock or water. I'm gonna give this a little stir. We're gonna bring this to a boil. I will cover it, reduce it to a simmer, and let that cook for about 30 minutes. My mole has been simmering for about 30 minutes now. 30 minutes is like the right amount of time for everything to soften, and I'm going to pull out my bay and avocado, and if I can find the cinnamon, which I may not be able to. If you can't find them, don't worry about it. Things shift as they cook, and there's another leaf. But as long as your blender is pretty decent and can make a good smoothie, it will make a good mole, and everything will be fine. All right, that is looking really good. It smells so incredible. Okay. I'm going to transfer the chilies into the blender. So we're gonna probably do this in batches. I definitely don't wanna overload the blender. This is obviously very, very hot. And once we start blending, there's a possibility if you overfill your blender that things might explode. So we definitely don't want that. All right. And then you can use a ladle for this. I actually prefer a measuring cup. It's just a little more efficient. Get some of the juice in there. You want some of the liquid in with the chilies to make sure that you have enough liquid to blend properly. Okay. Definitely 3/4 is probably about as high as I want to go. Okay, so you can see the steam is actually coming up out of the blender. And so when I blend hot things, I try and at least take the center piece out. Most blenders will have the centerpiece removable, but you want to make sure that you have a kitchen towel. And for this dish, because it's red and it stains easily, you want to use a towel that if it gets a little bit dirty, it's going to be okay. You also want to start very, very low. So start on your lowest setting, and we will slowly increase the speed. And eventually you want to take this to its highest setting to make sure that everything is completely smooth, but just go gradually. All right, I'm going to grab a large measuring cup. If you don't have something this size, you can get a big bowl. I'm going to transfer this to the measuring cup. You can see how beautiful that is. It's a really, really deep red color. And now we will puree the rest. So now, everything gets put back in the pot. So, oh, look at that beautiful color. Oh, it smells so good. Right. All right. It's already really hot, but I want it to come back up to a simmer. And this is a beautiful consistency. This is hot enough. I'm seeing little bubbles. You don't need it to be at a rapid boil. It's already cooked through. All we're doing is we're melting the salt, we're bringing all the flavors together of the two blended sauces, and we're going to melt the chocolate. I am using 1 ounce of 72% cacao dark chocolate. If you just look for bittersweet chocolate, anything above 70% will do. We're adding a little more sweetness, but what we're really doing is adding a little bit of richness and bitterness from the chocolate. And so, I'm gonna just add that in, turned off the heat. The residual heat of the mole will melt the chocolate. I'm gonna give it a little taste to make sure my seasoning is right. It's really good. I'm gonna plate up my mole. I have a beautifully roasted chicken. I'm gonna give this one last stir. Oh, it just looks so rich and delicious. It smells amazing. All right, I'm gonna show you the way I like to plate this. What I like to do is just sauce the bottom of whatever platter or plate or bowl. You want a decent amount. I would say, like, you know, this dish is called mole for a reason, so it's not like gravy. It's not like a hint of the gravy. You want a pretty good amount. All right. And now, I'm just gonna lay this down like that. Oh, it's so beautiful. And then I'm just gonna give this a little bit of a garnish. Just some toasted sesame seeds. You don't have to go crazy, but I think it just kind of breaks it up. It's so beautiful. Also, it's in the dish. All right, and that is a beautiful plate of mole coloradito. So now you know how to make mole, and I'm gonna have a big bite. Oh, so good. The richness from the chocolate kind of hits you first, and then you get the chilies and all the spices, the warming spices, the herbs. Get a little bit of the sweetness, and then it's got a nice little gentle heat at the end. It's so good. Mole is one of the most iconic dishes in Mexico, and I've made this recipe as simple for you as I possibly can, so you need to be enjoying your mole at the same time I'm enjoying mine.